Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 1061. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Well, coming up, we're going to continue our conversation with Dr. Dave Wessner down at Davidson College, keeping us honest on what's going on when it comes to the medical side of this virus and the social side, candidly, as well, Carol, as we try and grapple with this, especially looking ahead to the fall and school and back to office and all of those things.
And I really think the mental health aspect of this is something, I was going back and forth with a professor about this. This is something they're thinking about more and more in the impact. So lots to still unpack with him in just a moment. So Dr. Dave Wessner back with us in just a moment. Back, though, right now to Charlie Pellet with a check on...
Or Doug Krisner.
Oh, Doug, you know what? Forgive me, because this morning I heard both... I thought I heard both of you guys.
You may have. I mean, Pellet was in this morning, but he covered for someone else, and I'm covering for Pellet. It's musical chairs today.
It's just crazy. There is something in the air.
I'll never forget you, Doug.
Okay, well, I appreciate that.
Stop it. Krisner and I go way, way back.
I know.
He's mine first.
I did that on purpose.
Okay. So the optimism that you guys have been talking about as regarding fast tracking of vaccines and treatment for COVID-19, that's helping to send the equity market to record highs. Even so, I think it's fair to point out that breadth is very narrow. Nearly 59% of the members within the S&P 500 are trading above their 200-day moving average. You know, that is an unusually low number when you consider the S&P is at a record high. The only comparable period, the late 1990s, early 2000s, right before the bursting of the NASDAQ bubble. Ruh-roh. All right, so today, NASDAQ right now at a record 11,351 with a gain of about 0.4%. The S&P is higher by 0.7%, also extending a record, and the Dow is up about 0.9%. So we were talking earlier about the FDA authorizing the emergency use of convalescent plasma. Dr. Joshua Sharfstein is a Vice Dean for Public Health Practice at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health.
This concept has been around for over 100 years when it was used to stop measles outbreaks in the early 1900s. And the idea is that people who've recovered, they've recovered in part because they have neutralizing antibodies, and you can take them from that person and give them to someone else, and it may help with the infection, but also to prevent someone from becoming seriously ill. And the evidence has been adding up that this has a benefit for patients with COVID-19. Probably the earlier it's used, the greater the benefit, which is what has been seen in history. But they haven't been able to complete a definitive randomized controlled trial of sufficient size yet to know for sure.
That is Dr. Joshua Sharfstein. He is Vice Dean of Public Health Practice at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. The school is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg. He is founder of Bloomberg LP, the parent of Bloomberg Radio, and also Bloomberg Philanthropies. And I don't know whether you guys saw the news that is hitting the airline stocks today, pushing them higher. American Airlines was given emergency approval by the Trump administration for this new surface coating that kills the virus in as many as 7 days. For as many as 7 days, I should say. American shares are up by just about 9% right now. I'm Doug Krisner. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash.
You had me at retro. That's all I'm going to say. All
I
right,
could
Doug.
listen to Doug Krisner do Scooby-Doo all day long. That's a show. That's a show.
It is a show. We need more Scooby from Doug. All right, Doug, thanks so much. Jason, let's get back to Dr. Wessner.
Let's do it. All right. He is professor of biology down at Davidson College. So, Dr. Wessner, as we look across the fall, what's the thing, we've given the advice to everybody, every doctor we've talked to. You heard it from Dr. Sharfstein down at Johns Hopkins. Obviously, we have a great relationship with them. We have a great relationship with you. What's the advice you're giving people, giving families, just giving us as human beings as we move into this next phase, it feels like, of our lives where we're starting to go back to the office? Some kids are going to school. I know it's a little different where you are than where we are here in the tri-state area. What's the best advice for folks?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where we just have to remain vigilant. I mean, it seems like we've been in this forever. You said it's 24, 25 weeks, whatever it's been now. But I think we just have to remain vigilant. It hasn't gone away. It's not going away anytime soon. And I think especially as we get into the fall, you're indoors more. You have the confounding factors of influenza season picking up, the common cold picking up. Maintaining those mitigation efforts, wearing masks, the physical distancing, social distancing. I think people just have to be vigilant and not let up on those more simple approaches to preventing transmission.
So where do you think we're going to be in 12 months from now? Where do you think we'll be? Well, first of all, let's be sooner because
Yeah. How about 6?
How about 6 months? Where do you think, how will our life be?
Yeah, I think 6 months from now, I think we'll have a vaccine.
A good one?
A decent one.
Okay.
A vaccine that's maybe 60, 70% effective. I think that would be considered a win, quite frankly. But once we have it, you still have to roll it out. People actually have to be vaccinated. That's going to take some time also. So, 6 months from now, have a vaccine. Maybe 12 months from now, we'll have it all rolled out and people will be vaccinated. So, I think things are going to get better over the next 6 to 12 months, but it's not going to be an overnight change.
So the headlines that we saw, that story, and forgive me that I don't have the source on it, but it was kind of that this is a 2-year cycle thing, is not unreal. If you think about what you said about 12 months from now, so we'll have been roughly,
18 months in it.
Yeah, 18 months in by then.
Yeah, right. I don't think that's an unreasonable outlook at all to say that, from start to finish, and finish is probably a fungible word, but it's a 2-year process, yeah.
Well, I also do wonder, we've only got about a minute left with you, Dr. Wessner, if we do get smarter about pandemics on the other side of this, both, sort of how we react to them, both medically, but also socially to some extent.
Absolutely. I think, my hope is that a lot is learned from this one because, it's not going to be the last pandemic.
Right.
We've seen these, it seems like more and more frequently. We're going to see them more and more frequently, I think. And so, hopefully we've learned something about the best practices, best approaches from this one that limits the extent of the next one.
Yeah, well, here's hoping.
This is Good News Monday.
There it is. All right. Dr. Dave Wessner, thank you so much. Professor of Biology, back with us from Davidson College, on the phone from Davidson, North Carolina, alma mater of my friend Burtis Downs. Love Davidson College. It's really nice, really great liberal arts school down there in North Carolina.
I'm just looking forward to a day where we don't have to think about all the checks you need to do in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I realized there's a couple things that happened with me over the last week or so, or half a week, and it's just like, wow, I'm looking forward to being more normal.
In terms of like, do you have your mask? Can you go to this place?
Yeah,
Do you not go to this place?
stepping away from people, or
Yeah.
being in a setting where I'm like, you know what, this isn't so comfortable, or
Right.
you know what I mean? Like, I'm a people person. You're a people person. Like, I
Sure.
don't like kind of stepping back.
Right.
It's an awkward thing for me.
Yeah, I mean, even being out on a walk, and sort of like seeing people over the past few weeks and being like, do I tell them to wear a mask? It's like all those different things. I'm not a super confrontational guy. So, in any case. There's that. All right, Nancy Lyons, she's here. She's got World National Headlines. Hey, Nancy.
Hey, Jason. Postmaster General Louis DeJoy returned to Capitol Hill today, where Democrats took aim at recent mail delays that are widespread and significant, according to the Democrats. In his opening remarks, DeJoy denied taking any actions meant to slow the mail ahead of the election.
I did not direct the removal of blue collection boxes or the removal of mail processing equipment. Second, I did not direct the cutback on hours at any of our post offices. And finally, I did not direct the elimination or any cutback in overtime.
DeJoy, a major Trump donor, has said he implemented the changes that were recommended by earlier studies of problems at the Postal Service. Well, the GOP National Convention is officially underway in Charlotte, and already President Trump has made a surprise appearance.
The president treated the delegates to his ad-lib stump speech, from China to conservative justices to mail-in voting.
They'll be sending them, they'll be dumping them in neighborhoods, people are going to be picking them up, they'll be bribing, they'll be paying off people to grab some. This is going to be one of the greatest scams, and it's common sense. This has nothing to do with politics. They're trying to steal the election from the Republicans. That's what it means.
The president said Republican voters support him with enthusiasm, and the 336 delegates in the hall responded with the cheers and shouts he's enjoyed from much larger partisan crowds. In Washington, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
Well, tests on Russian anti-corruption advocate Alexei Navalny indicate he was indeed poisoned, despite Russian comments to the contrary. That's according to the German hospital treating him. He remains in serious but stable condition. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts.
All right, Nance, thanks so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly, Carol Massar here with you. And interestingly, Carol, we talked about having class outside. Everybody wants to have that little bit of outdoor space. And we're seeing this in New York City. We've been tracking New York real estate very, very closely throughout this because it has ebbed and flowed, mostly ebbed, especially when it comes to apartments. I was talking to a friend earlier who was talking about how, she felt like townhomes, especially with gardens, were going to do okay.
Yeah.
But, man, the apartment market, the co-op market specifically, is really, really going to be tough.
So check this out. Searches for New York City rentals with outdoor space are up 270% since before the pandemic started, according to real estate website Street Easy. And while rents for apartments without outdoor space in New York have fallen 6%, they've only fallen about 3% for those listed at having some outdoor space. You're in the burbs. I live in an urban environment, so it's kind of like Upper West Side Manhattan. And I have to say, we have some outside space, and it's a killer to have had during this time.
Yeah, no, it's huge. I mean, the same person I was talking to was like, well, you're in the burbs. How has that been? And I said, in this case, it's been incredible.
Great.
I'm looking out at my backyard right now, and we've spent a ton of time out there, and just being able to walk outside or do something on the back patio.
You fed the chickens this morning, I believe a few cows. You took the horses for a gallop.
Yeah, in my little backyard. Yeah, absolutely. Cows and chickens everywhere here in Westchester County.
I know a guy, actually, a girl. I can hook you up with chickens.
With some chickens? Yeah, that's just what I need. Yeah, Alice would do great with some chickens.
She would love them.
She would love some chickens. Yeah, she likes chicken. She likes eating chicken. So.
I think this story is really important. We're going to talk to Andy Brown, though, about suburbia versus cities. So this kind of plays into all of this. I mean, I don't think, anyway, we're not going to give it away, but I'm looking forward to that conversation because it fits into a big, broader one that we've been having, right?
We've been talking about this so much. Yeah. No, and we will continue to because alongside with everything, this is one of the big questions. This is Bloomberg.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
So today is the deadline for ownership in Apple shares to qualify for that 4-for-1 stock split. That will officially occur on August 31st. Right now, Apple shares are up by about 1.2% after a record in the Friday session. Today, a Morgan Stanley analyst, Katie Huberty, raised her price target on the stock to 520. Stock is trading a bit above 503 right now, and that is helping to lift the S&P to a record with a gain of more than 0.6%, and the NASDAQ comp also extending Friday's all-time high by about 0.3%. Fair amount of optimism in markets today about the Trump administration possibly fast-tracking not only vaccines but treatments for COVID-19. You'll recall the emergency use authorization given by the FDA yesterday for convalescent plasma. And yesterday also, the FT reported the Trump administration is considering whether to bypass regulatory standards as a way of accelerating experimental vaccines. Now, the administration pushed back on that notion, but it did give American Airlines emergency approval to deploy a new weapon against the disease. This is a surface coating that kills the coronavirus for as many as 7 days. American shares right now up by nearly 10%, and it's created a sympathetic advance in many of the airline stocks. I want to talk about Delta very quickly here because the company is preparing for a debt sale backed by its loyalty program. Delta shares right now higher by about 8.5%. I'm Doug Krisner, and that is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Doug, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly, Carol Massar. I have to say, I read this story over the weekend. It was all over Twitter. Mike Regan, such an amazing writer and commentator and analyzer of the market.
We should lock him at home more often, huh?
I know, seriously. He is joining us, as is Joel Weber, the editor of Bloomberg Business Week. A love letter to Powell, talking about Jay Powell from the Grateful Stock Market. A satire, Joel. Take it away.
I kind of had this idea that the Fed was worthy of a little bit of a love letter as the stock market, kind of just keeps creeping ever higher and into record territory, almost day after day now. And so what I kind of thought about was who could do such a feat, and that led me to Mike Regan. So Mike, when I invited you to dream with me on this, where did your head go?
Well, Joel, I'm willing to dream your dreams along with you wherever.
Wow, this is quite a moment we're having here on Bloomberg Business Week.
All right, everyone.
But I just thought it was a clever idea. I mean, how much can you write sort of the same old story about a new record high and credit it with, at least in large part, the low rates from the Fed and what they've done to sort of shore up the corporate bond market. So I thought Joel had a really clever idea to kind of approach it from a different angle. So of course I was on board, and I was trying to figure out, what sort of voice would the stock market have if it, were personified, and I just assumed it'd be a real smart aleck, a real wise guy. So that's kind of the tone I went with.
Well, but you also unveil some really thoughtful questions that I think some market watchers, Mike, are kind of wondering about at this point, right, when it comes to future Fed policy, and in a week where we're going to hear from Jay Powell.
Right. And, obviously that's the question I think on everyone's mind is, well, what more can the Fed do? I mean, obviously they've really inoculated the corporate bond market. I think that's the most important thing, is that in an economic downturn like this, what really freaks out the stock market more than anything is if that credit market starts to wobble. So the Fed, by buying corporate bonds and even corporate bond ETFs, I think, sort of took away a lot of the sort of background risk that stock investors would have worried about. But, the question is, well, once the Fed starts doing anything, I think people get greedy and expect more and more types of unconventional policies to keep the party going. And especially because, the stock market's roaring, but the economy is still a big question mark. I mean, the numbers aren't as bad as they were in say March and April and May. But we're certainly not back to where we were. What more could the Fed possibly do? A lot of people are sort of wishful thinking and hoping that they'll hint at some sort of yield curve control down the road where they'll keep those longer and 10 to 30-year yields in check, which would influence obviously mortgage rates and that sort of thing. But I don't know. I don't know what more you can expect from the Fed. They've kind of pushed back on that sense of yield curve control, that it's really imminent. A lot of the speakers from the Fed have just said they're not sure it really does as much good as people are hoping it would. So certainly all eyes are going to be on Powell when he does give that speech at the Jackson Hole Summit.
Joel, remember the story last week we were talking about the hackers and we wanted to do a table read? I feel like we should do a table read of this story. It would be a lot of fun, right?
But Mike, like what's a few more trillion ultimately, right? And that's sort of stole the kicker there a little bit. But like what are the odds that if the Fed really needed to do more at some point, if things really did, if say there's a second a wave of sorts, and that is the fear as we head into the colder months here, that that maybe there's a second wave that sort of gets a little mixed up around with the flu, like and the common cold. Like we're looking at some stuff that might get crazy again. And like what kind of ammo would the Fed potentially have if that scenario ever happened?
I would guess that Jay Powell or anyone at the Fed's first reaction to that would be, you really got to get the fiscal policy straightened out, because that's really where you can get focus the help to individuals, unemployed people, and struggling business owners that need it a lot more. So I think that would be their first pushback, to say, look, we can't solve everything. The Congress has to get sort of together and pass something to get that fiscal support. After that, I mean, it's a good question. I'm sure they'll consider buying more assets, buying more treasuries, more corporate bonds to keep those liquidity in those markets functioning. But I think ultimately their pushback would be, look, it's time for the fiscal side to take over and really, bolster that safety net for everyone. If what you're talking about turns out to be the case, which I think there's a pretty good chance it could be.
Well, I also love, Mike, we only got about a minute left, that you do mention the Robin Hood guys, Barstool Sports. I mean, this has all become part of the, dare I say it, Tom Keene is somewhere listening, the zeitgeist here that has contributed to this whole fervor around Jay Powell in many ways.
Right, and it's just such a surreal, bizarre thing to witness in the middle of a economic recession and a pandemic, is this sort of animal spirits run wild among the sort of individual retail investors of Robinhood and the disciples of Davy Day Trader Dave Portnoy. It's a very the icing on the cake for a very bizarre year, I think.
Can I just say, it's just such a fun read, and you talk about, what was up with the minutes from your last meeting, Fed? Don't get me wrong, I didn't actually read them. If I had the attention span for that type of stuff, you'd call me the bond market. Like, it is just wonderful nuggets. So it's a must read, and I'll make sure it's out on Twitter on my feed and share it with everybody.
All right. Mike Regan, thank you so much, senior editor and apparently now senior satirist for Bloomberg, joining us on the phone from New Jersey. Joel Weber, you never know where his mind is going to go. I love the idea that he's like, what about this?
It's
the
so
editor of Bloomberg
clever.
Business Week. He joined us from Massachusetts. Well, speaking of Massachusetts, if you are listening in New York, D.C., San Francisco, watching on YouTube, Bloomberg Business Week is going to continue right here. If you're listening on Bloomberg 1061 in Boston, Bay State Business, that is coming up next, Carol.
Yeah, we kind of have a, hey, dear city, it's me, suburbia. I'm really loving all the people you're sending me, but I'm a little worried it isn't going to last. We're going to kind of talk a little bit about that with our own Andy Brown, editorial director at Bloomberg New Economy. He's got a column out, so we're going to dig into that in just a moment. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Massar, Jason Kelly. This is Bloomberg.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters in New York, I'm Doug Krisner. It is 3 p.m. on Wall Street for this Monday, August 24th. We've entered the final hour of trading, and the equity market is at record highs, particularly where the S&P and the NASDAQ comp are concerned. Fair to point out, however, that breadth is very narrow. Only about 59% of the companies within the S&P 500 are trading above their 200-day moving average. Now, that is an unusually low number if you consider a market trading at record highs. For the moment, it seems to be a lot about optimism tied to the Trump administration possibly fast-tracking vaccines and treatments for COVID-19. Yesterday, we had the FDA authorizing the emergency use of convalescent plasma. The Financial Times reporting over the weekend the Trump administration is considering whether to bypass regulatory standards to accelerate experimental vaccines. And today, the administration gave American Airlines emergency approval to deploy a new weapon against COVID-19. This is a surface coating that kills the coronavirus for as many as 7 days, and that news is sending shares in American Airlines up nearly 10%. Also, a number of the other airline stocks trading higher, notably Delta, up about 8.5% right now. Separately, Delta is preparing a debt sale backed by its loyalty program. Right now, the Dow Industrial Average is up 0.8%, S&P 500 ahead 0.6%, NASDAQ comp rising about 0.2%. As expected, TikTok has filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration over that executive order banning transactions using TikTok here in the States. Today is the deadline for ownership in Apple in order to qualify for that 4-for-1 stock split on August 31st. Apple shares pushing up by about 1% right now. And Zoom trading a bit lower on reports of a number of outages earlier today, although the company is saying that service has been restored for many users. We've got a 10-year Treasury now yielding 64 basis points and crude oil higher at 42.40. That's WTI. I'm Doug Krisner in New York. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, so this is a definite hot topic when it comes to the pandemic's impact more broadly on society. It's about the urban to suburban move, and you know there's a real debate going on when Jerry Seinfeld actually writes about it in the New York Times, saying, you know what? New York, basically, it's going to bounce back. It's going to be just fine. So there's a fun read, and we'll put that on Twitter. You should also check out the column by our own Andy Brown, Bloomberg New Economy editorial director. In today's Business Week Economics, he's got a column out that specifically talks about the pandemic not stopping the rise of cities. Andy joins us on the phone in New York City. Andy, good to have you here with us. I can't tell you how many times Jason and I have a conversation with somebody in a certain industry or people who are living, working in New York, and whether or not the city is like on the demise. We've had these debates before.
Well, no, it's not. And I got to tell you, Jerry Seinfeld wrote by far the better column. His is a great piece. But I mean, the idea that this represents the demise of cities and that somehow or other New York is going to go away, that New York is dead forever, as the comedy club owner put it, is obviously complete nonsense. And it's completely ahistoric. Cities are where big ideas come from, and it always has been like this. And ideas arise when people get together. And the more people you have, the denser the city, the more connections you have, the more ideas you have. Ideas drive the global economy, and they drive humanity. It's been like this since ancient Greece, when Plato and Socrates got together and bounced ideas off each other and frequently argued. And Florence gave us the Renaissance, and Birmingham gave us the Industrial Revolution. And there's absolutely no question that the answers to many of the problems that we're facing now in our COVID destroyed economy and societies will arise from cities. And in many ways, New York has within itself the power to regenerate.
Right. Well, and that's the point you make, and that Jerry Seinfeld also makes in many ways, is that not dead, may be different, but not only different is okay, but different actually may be better in the long run. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, again, you look back at history, and it was epidemics cholera, yellow fever at the end of the 18th century that spurred many of the reforms, of the urban reforms of the 19th century. So New York built Central Park and put in a reservoir and fed by aqueducts, and London dug sewerage systems, and Paris tore down its old dingy tenements and recreated itself as the city of light with broad boulevards and tree-lined, streets, fountains. And this really is an opportunity for us to rethink cities. Not so much actually the infrastructure, that is important. It's really more the people.
Yeah.
And it's going to be about investing in people and investing in communities. And that's probably where the regeneration is going to come from, not just in New York, but in cities all over the world.
Well, and one of the things, Andy, that we've talked a fair amount about, and I think you pick up on here and certainly is on your mind, is the idea of you know what, New York may need a little bit of a reset in many ways. And certainly Manhattan, which has become so expensive in many ways, a little bit of a correction might actually bring back or regenerate, to use your word, some of what makes New York City so great and has historically.
Well, exactly. I mean, Jerry Seinfeld touched on this himself. He came to New York in the 19th century. He was young. He was full of ideas. He was
the 20th
creative.
century, the 1970s.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But so bringing down the cost of living in New York, you may well give rise to a whole influx of younger, creative people. And it's those job-hopping millennials that actually spread ideas. They both acquire knowledge and disseminate knowledge as they go from job to job. So, sure, some of the rich people, they won't come back, and that's a blow. There's no question. And Governor Cuomo is begging his rich friends to come back to New York because their spending is important to all kinds of small businesses. But then, if you really want to rebuild New York, you need to invent new sources of dynamism, new sources of growth. And people are saying, at least the experts that we have at the New Economy Forum and our committee is saying, the way to do that is to invest in the most deprived parts of New York. So you turn these areas of want and neglect into real sources of demand. They become the new engines of growth in the new economy.
And I got to say, Andy, when you look around New York, I remember going to college in the city, and there were parts of the city you just never went to. The far west side, downtown, also midtown. I think about now we have the High Line and all these cool things that have come out of neighborhoods that maybe you wouldn't go to. There's an interesting part in your column. You talk about the 15-minute city, and I feel like we're increasingly getting better about that, certainly in New York and some of our other major cities around the world.
Yeah, so the idea is really reconceptualizing cities as a series of smaller communities so that everything within that community, from education to healthcare, is within a 15-minute walk or bicycle ride. And number one, of course, that means putting in more bicycle paths. They're doing that in Paris right now. I think the mayor, Anne Hidalgo, calls them Corona pistes. But it also means, rethinking uses of buildings, for instance. What could we do with schools that are empty over the weekend? It means mixed-use commercial residential areas. It really means sort of turning our communities into much more sustainable sort of pods, and getting us back to a better future. Nobody wants to go back to long commutes. Right? We all want clean air, and these have been the advantages of, if there are advantages to this desperate period that we're living through.
I feel like if there's a bottom line, I mean, Jason, you and I talk about this a lot. We're so tired of commuting and the time you waste on commuting and what it does to your day. Great stuff as always from Andy Brown. Andy, thank you so much. Andy Brown, editorial director at Bloomberg New Economy, on the phone in New York City. Be sure to check out his columns on the Bloomberg and at Bloomberg.com. Right, Jason?
Love his stuff. And I think we're in for a shift. But cities, they reinvent themselves. It's part of the beauty of it. And listen, New York has seen some things over the years, that's for sure. Let's get down to another great city, Washington. That's where we find Nancy Lyons. She's got World National Headlines. Hey, Nancy.
Thanks, Jason. President Trump is officially the GOP's choice for president again. The vote has been taken. He has been nominated by delegates. He responded by making a surprise appearance at the newly convened convention.
We have the greatest base of support anywhere, at any time, any election, and people are starting to find that out.
New York's Attorney General says she is investigating whether President Trump's company falsely reported the value of his assets to secure loans and get tax benefits. Those were concerns that were brought up by his former personal lawyer and fixer, Michael Cohen. Postmaster General Louis DeJoy issued a pre-election warning during his appearance before House lawmakers today.
I encourage all Americans who choose to vote by mail to request their ballots early and to vote early as a common sense best practice.
He told lawmakers his advice should in no way be misconstrued to imply they lack confidence in the ability to deliver those ballots. Tropical storm Marco is falling apart as it nears the Louisiana coast, but it's bringing a surge of water. And close behind, Tropical Storm Laura has been pounding parts of Cuba. National Hurricane Center Director Ken Graham says Laura's really the storm to watch as it approaches the Gulf Coast.
We're still got some uncertainty with the forecast because we still have to go over portions of western Cuba. So central Louisiana over to the upper Texas coast is where the cone is, and the center, well, it could be anywhere inside of that cone.
Forecasters say the two-storm combo could bring a history-making onslaught of winds and flooding. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
All right, Nancy, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Well, this column by Neil Ferguson, Carol, you pointed it out this morning, among the most read. We're going to be talking a lot of politics for the next few weeks. I mean, we are less than 70 days, fewer than 70 days away from the election. You know, it's single-digit weeks, I believe, from now. Right?
Yeah.
It's like 9 weeks.
It's just around the corner. Like, we're going to kind of get back to school. Kids are going to get back to school. We're going to get through September, October, and it's going to be here.
Yeah.
So Neil Ferguson, and hopefully we can get him on directly. He is the Milbank Family Senior Fellow at the Hoover Institution at Stanford. He's a Bloomberg opinion columnist, frequent guest on Bloomberg platforms, and he writes a column that talks about how Joe Biden, if indeed he ends up in the White House come November, this is the headline on the column, could end up being a wartime president. It says, notwithstanding his pledges of uplift and healing, history suggests post-pandemic peace is rare and democratic wars are not. And this makes me a little bit nervous.
Yeah, it does, especially when you think about the volatile world we're living in now. Now, one of the counters to this argument, and he does have a lot of historical basis for this and talks about FDR and Lyndon Johnson and a number of people who have come in as Democrats and ultimately led the country to war. It feels like that Joe Biden is going to have a lot of peacemaking to do, I think it's fair to say, in terms of repairing some relationships around the world, and also kind of reinstituting, if you believe what he says, a more multilateral approach to diplomacy, which has not been the approach of the current administration, I think it's fair to say.
No,
it's been bilateral or unilateral in many cases.
Right, and former allies where we've had very strong relationships on the global stage have kind of moved on in some ways and have created other relationships. So I think from the get-go, you're absolutely right, Jason, that he's got to reach out to all of our allies and really kind of repair that, in terms of where we sit in this world and what role and responsibility we take as a nation.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
The equity market is extending record highs right now. We're a bit off the best levels of the day. Want to get you the very latest now as we cross to the Bloomberg Macro Squawk Desk and bring in Bailey Lipschultz. Hey, Bailey.
Good afternoon, Doug. As you said, stocks are trading higher amid signs the administration may fast-track vaccines and treatments for the coronavirus. The Dow is up about 245 points. S&P is higher by 20 points, with the NASDAQ also up 20 points as well. U.S. 10-year yield is at 0.65%, and small caps are higher by 10 points. 9 of the 11 main S&P sectors are trading higher, led by energy, financials, and materials, while healthcare and real estate are in the red. NASDAQ Biotech fell 55 points. Transports rose 1.5%. Semis added 8 points, while the VIX is up 1.4%. Leaders in the Dow, Boeing, Dow Inc., and American Express, while United Health, Intel, and Walmart are the worst performers. Airline, hotel, and cruise stocks rallied after the U.S. authorized a blood plasma treatment for COVID-19, and Delta is planning to issue new debt backed by its frequent flyer program. In deal news, Smartsheet bought startup Brandfolder for $155 million, and SBB Leerink said a sale of Alexion would be the best exit for holders. Wrapping things up, look for earnings from Palo Alto Networks after the bell. Live from the First Word Breaking News Desk, I'm Bailey Lipschultz. Doug?
All right, thanks, Bailey. For live audio of breaking news right on the Bloomberg terminal, the function is SQUA, then the green go key. I'm Doug Krisner. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Doug, thanks so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Well, Apple, they've had a pretty good year. Things are going well. Worth more than $2 trillion. People are buying iPhones and other stuff.
A little bit of an understatement, but yeah.
Yeah, there is one guy we call who knows more than anyone else we know about this company, what it means, and maybe more importantly, what its plans are going forward. He is a scoop machine. He's our guy, Mark Gurman, technology reporter for Bloomberg, joining us on the phone from Los Angeles. And we'll talk about the Lakers in a few minutes if we have time, Mark. But talk to us about what's going on, because it's going to be a pretty good year for Tim Cook owing to all that good news.
Yeah, it has been a good year for Tim Cook. Obviously, he got, yet another really big, over $200 million payout, according to our Bloomberg Billionaires Index. Now he is a billionaire. And that's different because unlike Jeff Bezos and, some of the other, people in his, position, his peers, he was not the founder of the company. Obviously, we know Apple was founded by Steve Jobs. So at this point, like you said, company's firing on all cylinders, but obviously there are some issues that I'm sure we'll talk about, like the Epic Games situation.
Yeah. So talk to us about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is almost a nightmare for Apple. It feels like every week there's another third-party developer out there complaining about the App Store and Apple's fees. And Epic Games, they have so much money. They have billions of dollars that they're working with. So they have the resources to, take Apple to court, right? And there's actually a hearing later today regarding Apple and Epic Games. And they make Fortnite, right? I'm sure, your kids all play it. I personally don't play it, but I know it's very popular with the younger crowd. And they basically put in a mechanism in their app not to give Apple their 30% cut. And Apple got upset, removed the app, threatened to delete its developer account. And so Epic is suing them now.
Is this all fair, all's fair in love and war and apps? Like, what is this going on between these two?
So I think these developers have seen how big Apple has gotten, maybe you can say, on the backs of these developers, and the developers want a bigger share, right? I mean, for some institutions, some developers, giving up 30% of your revenue off the top before tax, I might add, is a lot of money and perhaps unsustainable, right? I mean, if you have a business and you bring in $100,000 a year in revenue, right? Maybe you're taxed, 25%, right? And then you have a 30% tax from Apple as well. At the end of the day, you're probably left with well under 50% of the revenue because of this Apple share. And so developers are realizing that. They're upset, and they don't want to give that money anymore because they don't think that, distribution on the App Store with 2 million other apps is worth the price of admission.
Feels like Epic Games is sort of the Taylor Swift in this situation, right? Sort of fighting because they can for everybody else who they feel like is getting wrongly treated by this behemoth that's taking some of their money. And beyond this, Mark, I have to say, because of everything that has been going on elsewhere in the world, Apple, despite having to close retail stores and things like that amid the pandemic, they have found themselves as essentially helping drive the stock market in a very big way. What's going right for them right now?
Well, sales of their hardware devices and their services, right? I mean, are just at all-time highs, right? Their their quarterly revenue for the previous quarter was up 11% year over year. Mm-hmm. And if you would have asked me if Apple would be up 11% year over year before the numbers came out, I would have said no, because who would believe that they could be up over 10% in the middle of a pandemic? Well, the truth of the matter is the iPhone is a little down, right, as we know, but iPad is up, Mac is up, services are up, everything due to work from home. So they were in pretty good shape this past quarter, over $2 trillion now, or they crossed $2 trillion a couple business days ago, I should add. So, yeah, all is well in Apple world, but this developer situation certainly is hanging over the positives.
So what I want to know, Mark Gurman, is there a new phone I'm going to need to buy soon from Apple?
Well, the question is, do you need it?
Do I ever need one? Mine works, but, there are upgrades.
And then in my case, I don't necessarily need them, but obviously I'm always getting them because I'm addicted and I need to know these things. But yeah, there'll be 4 new iPhones with 5G launching across October and November. If you've used the new iPad Pro, or I guess the 2018 and 2020 iPad Pro, they look the same. That's the one with the sharp corners, super thin. It's my favorite Apple device at this point. Anyways, long story short, the new phones will look like mini versions of those. So I think that's going to be exciting, at least to probably me and you two and everyone listening. So I'm looking forward to that. 5G is an interesting question, though. Yeah. I feel like the pandemic has slowed down the rollout of 5G. Yeah. So you're really not going to get the full power of 5G because of the limitations of the pandemic for probably several more months.
All right, Gurman, Lakers, Blazers. What's your prediction?
Lakers win by 4 tonight is my prediction, and they go up 3-1, and then they finish in a gentleman's sweep 4-1 on Wednesday. So looking forward to it.
It almost feels like a normal world. You guys are talking about sports and watching sports.
I know, it's amazing. Oh, man. I'm sure, I know because he's a big basketball fan that Mark Gurman watched the Mavericks game yesterday with just one of the best buzzer beaters, Luka. Unbelievable. Anyway, Mark Gurman, he's the best tech reporter for Bloomberg, all things Apple. He joined us on the phone from Los Angeles. More ahead, including the chart of the day. It's Bloomberg.
Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 1061. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Coming up, Monday version, chart of the day. Dave Wilson. He sort of saved our bacon earlier.
Oh my God, as he always.
We're like on our cell phones. Dave's like, I'm here. Everything's good. You want to know what's going on in the market? I got you covered.
He really was. He's like, guys, I'm here. I'm here.
Yeah. He was just like the cool as the other side of the pillow.
That is Dave in a nutshell. So we've got the chart of the day in just a moment. Right now, let's get back to your top business stories. Check in with Doug Krisner. Hey, Doug.
Equity market right now is at record highs, although that's on a technical basis because I'm looking back to Friday's session when we had the record finishes for both the S&P and the NASDAQ. But today we are slightly off session highs. Generally speaking, there seems to be a fair amount of optimism still on the Trump administration delivering fast tracks for vaccines and treatments for COVID-19. Today, the EPA gave American Airlines emergency approval to deploy a new weapon against the disease. This is essentially a surface coating that kills the coronavirus for as many as 7 days. And American Airlines shares right now are up more than 10%. In sympathy, got to point out Carnival Corp rallying by about 10% as well. And as long as we're talking about airlines, Delta shares are rallying as well. The company is preparing to issue some new debt backed by its frequent flyer program. This is a similar approach taken by United Continental. Now, the terms and including the yield are still being finalized on the Delta deal. As soon as that breaks, we'll pass it along here on Bloomberg. Well, as expected, TikTok has filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration. This is over that executive order banning transactions using the Chinese app in the States. Also, a deadline today for ownership in Apple stock. That would be in order to qualify for the 4-for-1 stock split as of August 31st. Right now, Apple shares rising and leading the S&P 500 to a gain of about 0.8%. NASDAQ comp rising by about 0.4%. And the Dow is higher by more than 1%. I'm Doug Krisner. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Doug, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg. There's no way I would get this.
Is this? Wait a minute. I feel terrible. 5-man electrical band?
That's the one.
Woo! 1970. Yeah, I did.
Don't celebrate that.
I know.
but I have to tell you, it gets a little complicated because that song was actually hit a second time in an acoustic live version.
That's why I think I actually.
But it wasn't 5-man electrical band that did it. You know who it was? It's a very familiar name.
I don't know.
I feel like
I
can hear.
A company we talk about all the time has the same name.
Tesla?
Congratulations.
Whoa! Jason Kelly, no Googling needed.
No Googling needed there.
Well, I made it pretty obvious. Let's be honest.
You did.
In any case.
Oh, come on. Come on, Dave.
Carol was about to say, Microsoft?
Airbnb?
Stone?
Yeah, exactly.
Anyhow.
Hey, guys, this is like being around my family, the way you guys gang up.
You
all right,
love it.
Doug, Dave, it's all yours now.
That's okay. Call me whatever. You know, at least
Dave.
I'm here. In any case, why signs? Because, you know, if you're looking for a sign that maybe we're back where we were 1999, 2000, when you had, you know, internet stocks sort of leading a bull market, getting into what historically at least you would consider a bubble, well, we may be back there again. If you look at the prices of a couple of exchange-traded funds, and, you know, this is something I ran across late last week looking at the Twitter feed of David Keller over at Sierra Alpha Research. He picked out these 2 ETFs, one of which tracks healthcare and the other one tracks technology. And in both cases, we're talking about the Select Sector Spider exchange-traded funds. So, you know, the healthcare Spider for years had a higher price than the technology spider. Well, that relationship within the past couple of months has turned around. So in other words, you look in June, and the healthcare spider fell behind for the first time since May 2001. Last week, the gap got to more than $10 a share, and that hadn't happened since December 2000. So, and that was, of course, the aftermath of the 1990s internet bubble. So, it's just a simple sort of indicator in a sense. You're just looking at share prices, no further. But that's enough to kind of get you thinking that maybe something's different here.
I think, well, what do you mean something's different this time around, right, Dave?
Well, that we've kind of gone back to where we were in the past. It's just in the relationship between technology stocks and the rest of the market, in this case, healthcare. And let's be specific here. We're talking about the Spider Healthcare is ticker XLV, and the tech ETF is ticker XLK. So that's what we're referring to. If you want to see this chart, folks, send me an email. I'll get it to you with the explanation that goes with it and everything I do going forward. The email address is dwilson@bloomberg.net. That's dwilson@bloomberg.net.
I wonder if Tesla, the band, has gotten any sort of residual attention, Dave, from Tesla, the company, being as popular as it is. I mean, it's not worth billions and billions of dollars worth of records, but maybe a little something here and there. Who knows?
Good question. And I'm looking, they still have a website, so they're still out playing. Well, I have no idea if Elon Musk even knows the band exists, but stranger things have happened.
That's true.
I want to play the Tesla version. I'm going to go back and play it. I love acoustic in general. Don't you?
Yeah,
Don't you
I did.
like
It's so
acoustic?
funny, though, when you gave that hint. I can hear the song, but I would not have named. I mean, they were generally a harder rock band, like a metal band,
Tesla
right?
was.
Well, I was just going to say the video that comes up, it's looks like some skulls, and actually I think it's skeletons. And not exactly what I was envisioning.
Yeah, not a good,
In that case, I mean, five-man electrical band, a whole different story there. And that was a pop hit.
Right.
For sure.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like, I'm trying to remember, didn't White Snake had sort of a ballad? There occasionally they would do some acoustic stuff, those hair bands, just to take it down a notch.
Just
as it were.
show us that we've got some range.
Absolutely.
A little soft side. All right, Dave Wilson, we'll talk to you just after the close of trading for your stock of the day. Not taking the market down in many ways, Carol. See what I did there? Still very much in the green, not quite at the highs of the day, but I mean, the Dow is up over 1%.
Yeah, so the rally continues, right? And we've seen the S&P up, 4 weeks in a row, and so it's continuing on this Monday. In a week where we're going to hear some interesting stuff from the Fed chief and a few other things.
The Dow at this moment is only down 1% for the year. Dow. I mean, Nasdaq's already in the positive by 27%, and the S&P.
Remember how
6%.
Charlie used to say, "Welcome to Funky Town, welcome to Crazy Town."
Exactly. All right, let's get down to Washington and Nancy Lyons. Hey, Nancy.
Hey, Jason. The House reception for Postmaster General Louis DeJoy is not as welcoming today as last week's Senate appearance. Congressman Ro Khanna of California expressed concerns about the sorting machines that have been removed.
What is the harm in putting these machines, even if the machines, in your perspective, don't do anything, what is the harm to do it till Election Day?
In Washington, it makes plenty sense. To me, it makes none.
You haven't explained why. And then final question.
Because they're not needed. That's why.
But if it will restore people's faith in a democracy and avoid a polarized electorate, I would think...
Get me the billion, and I'll put the machines in.
Democrats are concerned that DeJoy, a Trump donor, instituted changes at the Postal Service to aid President Trump's re-election chances. Well, the Trump administration's plan to sell drilling rights in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge is facing a court challenge.
Sources tell Bloomberg environmentalists and Alaska natives are filing a pair of federal lawsuits in Alaska. The challengers include a coalition of indigenous people who subsist on the porcupine caribou that migrate through the refuge. Congress passed a law in 2017 requiring 2 auctions of at least 400,000 acres in oil leases by late 2024. The Interior Department went further last week, authorizing leases across the entire 1.5 million acre coastal plain. The groups that are suing say the Interior Department glossed over the potential negative effects. Nathan Hager, Bloomberg Radio.
Jerry Falwell Jr. says he's seeking help for the emotional toll from an affair his wife had with a man who he says later threatened them. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts.
All right, Nancy, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Well, a couple of headlines to talk about related to Apple. We were just talking about the company and its juggernaut nature with no less than Mark Gurman. And we did mention, or I mentioned in passing, that they that Apple had closed some stores and then reclosed some stores owing to some local COVID-19 spikes. Those are going to reopen next week, and it's an interesting sign and tracks, I think, to some extent, Carol, with what you were saying earlier on in the show in terms of some cases, case numbers declining, deaths declining.
Some of the hotspots.
And this is a reopening of sorts, a reopening of sorts.
Don't you feel like Apple has been this kind of very closely watched metric throughout this whole process? We watched, when Apple stores closed in Asia and when they talked about reopening.
A retail bellwether, right?
Yeah, that and also the Starbucks stores. I feel like these are the things we watch to get an idea of how our society is reopening. And so you're right, Jason. Apple, or according to those with knowledge of the matter, Apple does plan to reopen some U.S. stores that were shut due to the virus. They closed all of their 270 U.S. stores back in March. And then started reopening stores in May, only to reclose more than 120 of them. I remember when that headline happened again, and we were like, okay, wait a minute. Things are slowing down again, right?
I do love the fact that he was clearly working on this while he was talking to us. I'm imagining Mark Gurman in his house in LA, typing and being like, yeah, okay, you dopes. This is what's going on with Apple. I'm trying to break some news here. No, keep talking. Yeah, Lakers are going to win in a gentleman's sweep. Yep, check. All right, next.
Yeah, Tim Cook makes a lot of money. Blah, blah, blah. Carol, go get a new phone.
Yeah, sorry, I got to move the stock right now with another scoop.
It's so true because it crossed at 337.
Yeah, literally. He got off the phone with us and was like, okay, I'm going to break this news now. In any case, a big story. Check it out on the Bloomberg. It's going to be one of the most read. Can pretty much guarantee that, as are most of the things that Mark Gurman writes.
Yep, Apple shares right now, if I take a look, they're up 6.2% in today's session. All right, let's get back. Yeah, I know exactly this.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
We've got less than 13 minutes now in today's session. Equities extending record highs from Friday, where the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ comp are concerned. Fair amount of optimism about the Trump administration possibly fast-tracking vaccines and treatments for COVID-19. Today, the EPA gave American Airlines emergency approval to deploy a new weapon against COVID-19. This is a surface coating. It kills the coronavirus for as many as 7 days. Right now, shares in American trading up by about 9.5%. And in sympathy, we have Carnival Corp trading higher as well. And as long as we touched upon the airlines, should point out that Delta is preparing to issue some new debt. This is going to be backed by the company's frequent flyer program. The size of the deal and terms, which would include the yield, have not yet been finalized. Today is the deadline for ownership in Apple in order to qualify for that 4-for-1 stock split on August 31st. Jason and Carol were talking a short while ago about the company planning to reopen U.S. retail stores, those that had been closed over the past several weeks due to a spike in local cases of COVID-19. Shares in Zoom right now trading a bit lower. There were reports earlier of partial outages. The company saying service for many customers has been restored. 10-year Treasury right now yielding 65 basis points. I'm Doug Krisner. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no. Who's gonna drive you home? Honey, please, I'll do the driving. Drive on. Excuse me, I want to drive. Just drive, baby.
It's the question that drives us.
This is the Drive to the Close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
All right, it is time for the Drive to the Close, another green day to kick off the week. Let's understand what's going on in the market. Welcoming back Margie Patel, Senior Portfolio Manager for Wells Fargo Asset Management, joins us on the phone from Boston. Margie, how are things up in Boston?
Well, we're ahead of the curve on the COVID. I think we were attacked very hard, and we've had pretty good numbers as far as decline. But it looks like COVID is pretty much on a decline everywhere, which is great for the market.
Is your world getting back to normal to some extent, Margie?
Well, it's really, I think for the investment business, it's very seamless to work from home, work off-site. So we haven't seen any major changes, and I think everyone has been very pleased with how well it's gone.
Does that mean you stay working from home? I just got to ask.
Well, I think they did take a survey, and I think it showed the majority of people felt they were working just as well from home as going into the office. So I think that they keep postponing the date at which they'll decide when people come back in. So they're watching and waiting.
And so is the recent optimism in the market sort of owing to this sort of sentiment, Margie? But this is a market that feels like it's been optimistic for some time, especially if you look at the NASDAQ, the S&P, both being into the green, the NASDAQ well into the green for the year. What is the market sentiment at this moment, factoring in everything that we're still worried about as it relates to coronavirus?
Well, it's interesting. Since the beginning of June, we've had a more than doubling of cases of COVID, and yet the market is up over 10% over that time period, showing the market is really not focusing on the number of COVID cases. And I think really the market is looking once again more fundamentally at the actions that the Federal Reserve took to lower rates, to flood the financial markets with liquidity, to basically say there is a floor under which the market will not go in order to keep the economy stabilizing. So I think that's what the NASDAQ certainly is looking, and other sectors are slowly picking onto that because we've seen some fundamental changes. Housing, autos have improved. Inventories are very low, poised to do a little better if we see a small pickup in activity, which we've seen. So maybe the market is really looking for a typical reaction after the Fed dramatically lowers rates and increases the amount of liquidity.
You know, in any market environment, you can make money, but I do wonder, as you know, Jason talked about, and as we watch the continued grind higher on the equity side of things, what makes you nervous, Margie, when you look at the equity market specifically?
Well, you have to be, I think, realistic that a handful of stocks are really what caused the peaks that we're seeing in the marketplace. And the average stock, the bulk of the market is actually negative in the Standard & Poor's year to date, especially in the value area. And so the big question is, can that handful of stocks continue to drive the market higher? Will we see a broadening out? Will the economy broaden out enough to include a lot of those sectors? And at this point, you have to be hopeful, but it's not really clear. So I think that it looks as if the market is still going to allow this handful of stocks, top 10, 12%, something like that, to continue to drive upward, and the rest of the market, I think, will just sort of slosh around, waiting for more signs that there's a more substantial pickup in the economy.
And so the Fed, you mentioned it. We have a great story that we were talking with Mike Regan about earlier, essentially, which is a satirical love letter from the market to Jay Powell for all that he's done, but also mentioning, Margie, and I'd love to get your perspective on this, some of the distortions that we've seen in this market owing to the pandemic, specifically thinking about the role of Robinhood and some of these day traders and the retail element. How do you sort of synthesize all of that, both the role of the Fed, but also the really meaningful role that retail investors have played across this market?
Well, I think you could say the retail, the Robinhood investors, as well as many parts of the hedge fund community, frankly, that many of those individuals are really dominating the short-term trading that we're seeing, very high volatility. One group of stocks goes up today, goes down tomorrow because it's very, very technically driven. And I think that is basically a lot of noise. And underneath it all is what's the real fundamentals in the marketplace. And those trends are still intact, and we're seeing these other people just sort of play around those trends and not really be a big force in changing the fundamental of the direction, which frankly is more the same. The chosen few growth stocks, I think, are going to continue to power up. The rest of the market is going to slosh around and not make too much progress.
So if you had go ahead.
No, please.
I was going to say, if you had new money, Margie, to put to work in this environment, where would you go?
Well, I think you have to look for growth and also look for safety, because the future really is murky. We don't really know. Plus, we have an election. So I would stick with very high quality companies that have proven their ability to grow through the downturn, secular growers over many years. And that's what the market has really reflected, but I think it's still the right trend to be on. So safety from a downside correction and ability to profit if the economy advances and these secular drivers keep in force.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much. Margie Patel is Senior Portfolio Manager for Wells Fargo Asset Management. She joined us on the phone from Boston. Carol?
Yeah, good stuff. This is someone who has seen a lot of market cycles, so it's always curious to hear what she has to say about the market environment. And I think, it's hard to ignore kind of the continued grind forward. Like, I think about how many times we talk about this with Dave Wilson. Excuse me as I caught my a little tickle there. But we're just looking at stocks continuing to move higher, and I know it's focused on a few specific names, but nonetheless, we continue to see them move higher. You mentioned the Dow, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, listen, one more good day it could happen this week, and we could see the Dow in positive territory, joining the other major indices here in the United States, the NASDAQ and the S&P, all of which have found themselves in the green. Now, we were talking about Apple earlier. Apple and other tech stocks have had a huge hand in that, so can't discount that. And also can't discount one of the things that I asked Margie about, which is those Robinhood traders. We got the close of trading coming up next. Movers and Shakers. Dave Wilson is back. Stick with us.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters in New York, I'm Doug Krisner. That's the sound of the closing bell for this Monday, August 24th. Records today for both the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ, although market breadth today in equity trading was very narrow. Only around 59% of S&P 500 members are trading above their 200-day moving averages, and that is, in and of itself, an unusually low number, with the S&P at an all-time high. The Dow today with a gain of nearly 1.4%. Dow Chemical shares leading this advance. Dow shares up nearly 6% today. You know, generally speaking, the markets bet on the likelihood of the Trump administration fast-tracking vaccines and treatments for COVID-19. Today, we had the EPA giving American Airlines approval to deploy a new weapon against the disease. This is a surface coating that kills the coronavirus for as many as 7 days, and that ignited a rally in shares of American Airlines. And in sympathy, Carnival Corp was up today as well. And as long as we're talking about the airlines, we have to mention Delta. Company is preparing to issue some new debt backed by its frequent flyer program. If you recall, a while back, United Continental made a similar move. Now, the size and deal, or rather, the size of the deal and terms for Delta, including the yield, have not yet been finalized. Today is the deadline, or was, for ownership in Apple in order to qualify for that 4-for-1 stock split next Monday, August the 31st. Today, Morgan Stanley raising the price target on Apple, and we're learning now that Apple is planning to reopen some of those U.S. retail stores, those that were closed over the past several weeks due to a spike in local cases of COVID-19. 10-year Treasury last quoted in New York at a yield of 65 basis points. Crude oil moving higher. Nearly 60% of crude production in the Gulf of Mexico has been shut down because of those approaching tropical storms. I'm Doug Krisner. That's the Bloomberg Business Flash.
Wild thing, think you move me.
I got a few moves I know you'll like.
Shake it through, shake it through, yeah, yeah.
Oh, come on, Simon. Shake him, not stir.
Just move on up toward your destination.
I can make things move without touching them.
Shaking all over.
Bloomberg Business Week, Movers and Shakers, with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
Yes, indeed. One day down in terms of trading. And Doug, of course, breaking down those major equity averages for the Monday trade. And Jason, if I take a look at the S&P 500, what kind of trade that we got, and overwhelmingly a bullish tone. 412 names. Talk about a broad-based rally. 412 names in the S&P 500. Higher today, 92 lower, 1 unchanged. And if I look at those major industry groups, there are 11 in the S&P 500. 10 of them were higher. Healthcare was just down a touch, down about 0.6%. But energy was up 2.6%. Financials up 2.25%. Industrials up 1.7%. Materials up 1.7%. So, yeah, this was kind of an all-in trade today.
It was. And listen, there was a lot of optimism, and your two biggest gainers were in the hospitality sector. One you are very familiar with from a big interview that you did, which you can catch on your podcast feed with the CEO of Carnival. That was your biggest gainer in the S&P.
Listen, when you're thinking about ways to get the hospitality sector open, and Doug Krisner talked about it a little bit, but you have a couple things that are going on, and some of it has to the use of convalescent plasma as a treatment for COVID-19, so that the point is, if you get it, and we heard earlier from one of our guests, Dr. Wessner, he said, you know, if you get treated with it earlier, your outcome is much better. So there's, you know, we're increasingly coming up with ways that we're going to probably, we think. That's a good point. Right.
It's limited data, but the limited data and the reaction shows you how much we're craving something.
Right, and the disinfectant, I thought it was really interesting that EPA, the U.S. EPA granting emergency approval for American Airlines. I don't quite understand, though, wait, American versus, like, I'm still trying to get my head around this story. Why is it American that gets this versus anybody else? And my understanding is it can only be used in Texas right now?
Yeah, that's the only approval that it's gotten so
Oh,
far. I think
okay.
it's a Texas company. It's gotten approval in Texas. American is based in Texas, and I believe that's how it all comes together.
I just think at this point, don't you want like the EPA to say more broadly, this
Yeah, I
is safe
do.
versus, hey, if you're in Texas,
Just like spray it down. Spray it down, folks.
spray the cattle, spray
What the heck?
whatever,
Yeah,
spray oil
exactly.
well.
It's like, hey, you want to go get a taco? Was the place sprayed? Then heck yeah. I mean, I lived for a long time in Texas. I love Texas.
I'm sorry,
but-
all my Texas relatives.
I know,
you've
man.
lived there, Jason, but
I know. Yeah, no, it's for real. But listen, we'll see. These are the sorts of things that do give us some optimism because, as we talked with Dr. Wessner about, and I think you brought up the point and he validated it, we're going to be living with this for a couple years before we're really out of the woods. And so we do need to find ways to make it marginally or maybe more than marginally safer to go about our business in many ways.
Can we talk about those trillion-dollar stocks and those stocks that are actually, splitting? And I know Apple's one that you're watching because it got another bump up big time. I think more than 6% in today's trade.
Right. And I think part of that is owing to you need to be a shareholder of record by this date today to participate in that split. The other thing that probably didn't hurt is Mark Gurman's scoop that he put out shortly after we got off the phone with him about how they are reopening those stores, those retail stores that were reclosed after some of those COVID outbreaks in specific markets.
Typing with his toes as he was
Seriously,
talking.
no, I think I really think he was like typing this scoop while he was talking on the phone, like he had us on speaker, and he's like, "Yeah, sorry guys, I'm breaking some news." Yeah, Tim Cook,
And it
big
was so
pay
calm.
package. Yeah,
Yeah. So, I mean, listen, Apple is up 71% this year. Tesla is up 381% this year. And these are stocks that are, they're about to become more accessible to investors, right?
all right. Let's take a quick look at volatility. The VIX, it was down a touch, about 1%, closing at 22.30. It's Bloomberg.
All right, Dave, you're up.
Hi, my name is Dave.
Wilson, where are you? Wilson!
Just what do you think you're doing, Dave?
We're going for the price on Wilson.
Open up the door, it's Dave. Who? Dave.
Hey, Mr. Wilson!
Hey, Mr. Wilson, the aforementioned Dave Wilson, our stock setter, back with your stock of the day. What you got?
Grow Generation, Jason. It's a company that owns hydroponic and organic garden centers. They sell supplies to marijuana growers and other commercial cultivators, as well as home gardeners. Grow Generation was founded in 2008 and went public in 2016. The ticker is GRWG. Company stock surged by 79.5% last quarter, which ended with a $42 million share sale. This month has been even more volatile. Grow Generation rose 156% in a six-day rally that ended on Wednesday. Along the way, CEO Darren Lampert appeared on CNBC and said, quote, business is booming. Grow Generation then pulled back. On Friday, it was targeted in a critical report by short seller Hindenburg Research. Now, the company accused Hindenburg of market manipulation in a statement. Today, filings showed Lampert, President Michael Solomon, and Chief Financial Officer Monty Lamorado all sold stock last week. Lampert and Solomon sold through prearranged trading programs that were scrapped Sunday. Even so, Grow Generation shares fell today by about 17%. That brought their loss over the last three trading days to about 35%. And that was the biggest drop ever over a three-day period for that stock.
All right, interesting one, Dave Wilson. And Dave, in our chat, you confirmed that I had that directionally right, that America was able to do it because it's a Texas company that invented it. It's all
Absolutely.
staying in
And
Texas.
well, it's the Texas Department of Agriculture that applied
Approved
for
it.
the waiver that the EPA granted. Yeah.
Got it.
just
So
gonna
the
say that-
EPA has weighed in, so that's good. I
Okay,
guess.
but still only Texas.
Right. Because it was the Texas, as Dave just said, it was Texas.
But
that applied
Americans
for
going
the
to try and get other states on board, and certainly you'd think that the other airlines would too.
Yeah, I would think like, hey guys, this works for me. Like, let's just all be in on it.
Right.
And then
Yeah,
hopefully
Americans got major hubs in 9 states, so you can't fly all the planes to Texas to get the work done.
Can I just ask you, Grow Generation, what they do is not like my Aero Garden that I have at home, right?
Not exactly.
Okay.
It's,
I grow lettuce.
It's that other garden that you have. in any
No,
case.
it's not, Jason
All
Kelly.
right, Dave Wilson, thank you so much. Let's get out to Ed Baxter in San Francisco. He's got world national headlines. Hey, Ed.
All right. Hey, Jason, thanks, guys. Donald Trump has been renominated. This is a symbolic moment to open the convention, officially start the campaign. Mike Pence gets a nomination as well, of course. Mr. Trump said the country is going now in the right direction.
We just broke a record on jobs, an all-time record. There's never been 3 months where we've put more people to work, over 9 million people.
Now, for the convention, his major speech is expected to be Thursday, but is expected to make some kind of appearance all 4 nights. Fire situation, wildfires in California still dire. Governor Gavin Newsom with the overview here.
4,292 wildfires this time last year. Today, over 7,000 wildfires, 7,002 burning now, north of 1.4 million acres.
7 people have died. He says help from the outside is on the way. The Gulf Coast still waiting to see how severe the twin tropical storms will be. Half of the offshore oil production has been shut down in preparation. Contentious day for Postmaster General Louis DeJoy in front of the House. Internal Postal Service data showing a drop in levels in July shortly after he took control.
As our on-time departures are approaching 98%, and wasteful extra trips are down by over 70%. While we have had temporary service decline, which should not have happened, we are fixing this.
Yeah, he says he will protect mail-in ballots and says the election will be safe, but urges people to vote and vote early. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on quick take by Bloomberg in San Francisco. I'm Ed Baxter. This is Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Ed, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Well, I have to say, this is maybe a little oversharing, maybe not. Cut the cord this weekend.
You did
Cut
it?
the cord. Yeah, canceled DirecTV. Feel good about it. And it is amazing when I looked at the bill how much we were spending. So we're starting to rebuild a little bit, and we're sort of going like service by service.
And watch it build again a little bit.
It's going to build.
It's going to be
definitely
different.
is. Disney Plus. What's interesting to the point of this story, the one thing my wife said, owing in part to Frozen, new Frozen, as well as our most recent favorite hit, Tangled, got to keep Disney Plus.
Alice took her Elsa doll and just on the table and said,
it's like this not up for debate. Yeah, not up for debate. But interesting. So Chris Paul Murray has a great story. And listen, we've been talking a ton about this in terms of the streaming wars, who's going to win. Netflix, obviously, they're to some extent in a category of their own. But when it comes to the old media companies, quote unquote, Disney leading the way in terms of actually making money from streaming.
The numbers in this and how quickly Disney has pivoted, a word that we have used a lot here as a result of the pandemic and businesses having to shift. I mean, this is going to become important, already is, to their bottom line. And this is interesting. There was a report put out today by Macquarie Research. Disney will generate an estimated $11.2 billion in direct-to-consumer revenue this year. That would account about 19% of its total sales, a level rivals in traditional media have not matched. And a lot of it has to do with their streaming and how quickly they have ramped up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the other reason it's really important, especially as it relates to Disney specifically, is nobody going to the theme park. You know, so, very, very few people, I should say. And so they need something to offset. And by the way, nobody going to theaters right now, except in very limited cases. So they need this to work, and it is working so far. So we'll see.
It's interesting stuff, no doubt about it. We'll put this out on Twitter. This is Bloomberg.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
We had the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ Composite at record highs today. A lot of betting that the Trump administration is going to fast-track vaccines and treatments for COVID-19. Yesterday, we had news that the FDA has approved widespread use of convalescent plasma to help people recovering from COVID-19. Today, the EPA gave American Airlines emergency approval to deploy a new weapon against the disease. This is a surface coating that kills the virus for as many as 7 days. And today, American Airlines shares were up more than 10%. In sympathy, Carnival shares up nearly 10%. Dow Industrial Average rising by just about 1.4% today, 28,308. That was shy of a record. But the S&P at an all-time high, 3431. The gain today was about 1%. NASDAQ Composite at an all-time high, 11,379 with a gain of 0.6%. A lot of the energy complex advanced today. We have the tropical storms rolling toward the U.S. Gulf Coast. Nearly 60% of crude production in the area has been shut down. Today, gasoline futures jumped to a 5-month high. 10-year Treasury last quoted in New York at a yield of 65 basis points. I'm Doug Krisner. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Doug, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly and Carol Masser here with you, and so excited. It's the most wonderful time of the year, maybe every 4 years, because the conventions, they're here. We saw the Ds last week. It's the R's turn, and they are off to the races already. Got the nominations all done today. So, surprise, surprise, President Trump, Vice President Pence, they're running again. They're running for re-election. Let's understand what we may see from the GOP and what we're already seeing. Rick Davis back with us, partner at Stone Court Capital, former Republican strategist, and, of course, a Bloomberg contributor. So lucky to have him in the family. All right, so, Rick, there was a lot of run-up this weekend. I feel like a lot of stories about what we will and won't see. What's the thing that jumps out at you about the GOP version of this time around?
Well, I think going in, it's hard to tell until it's over, but going in, the lack of policy and philosophy seems to be something that's quite unusual. You know, the Trump campaign made a decision not to have a platform. It's the first time, I think, in Republican Party history at a convention that they have decided against a platform. And platforms tended to be a little bit too lobbyist-centric over the last, few conventions, but they do stand as sort of the ideological governance of the party. And what's the party stand for? Under Trump, the party stands for Trump, and really whatever he wants it to be. And so this is very much in keeping with how Donald Trump likes to run things. It's all about him, and that's what this convention is going to be all about.
Well, Rick, wait a minute. Oh, I'm sorry, Jason.
Well, I just wanted to say the one thing about that because
well, the thing is, we've already heard from Trump.
Yeah,
with
and
the roll
we'll
call
continue
today.
to a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, you're going to hear from him every day, probably multiple times a day. He's already said that he was going to appear in prime time every night. So it's not like Thursday is the special occasion where Donald Trump gets to actually receive the nomination and give his, equivalent of a keynote speech for the convention. No, he's going to do it every night. And he even showed up earlier today and basically accepted the nomination. So it's different, right? I mean, it's more like a reality show where it's all about Donald Trump rather than a traditional convention that follows some kind of prescription.
Yeah, I do want to go back to the platform comment for a second, Rick, because it was notable, and I paid pretty close attention to this, and I did see this headline where it sort of snuck in that the convention essentially resolved that, we're going to have a platform in 2024. I mean, that really does sort of blow my mind, but it also speaks to the fact that it feels like even when asked directly by people, including people on Fox News and other, shall we say, Trump-friendly platforms about what the agenda for a second term would be, Trump has not been, shall we say, very specific.
That's right. It's very tricky to determine, forget the primary rhetoric and the attacks on the Democrats, what is the plan for the next 4 years, right? I mean, this is really what the voters are being asked to vote on is, do I want to give Donald Trump 4 more years? And if so, what's he going to do? Now, the closest I've been able to discern is from Vice President Pence, who seems more articulate on the things that they're going to do. They're going to uphold the rule of law, which is a little bit of code word. You know, they're going to go back to fundamental freedoms. Code words again. You know, they're going to preserve an American way of life. Super code words, right? Yeah. And this is the agenda, which means basically anything. And so I do think they're stressing out voters who are maybe not inclined to want to be for Biden. They want a reason to be for Trump, but he's not really giving them anything hard to hold on to.
Right. I wonder if for those folks that like Donald Trump or might vote for him, does platform not really matter as much, Rick? And is it just about, I like Donald Trump?
Yeah, that's pretty much what Donald Trump has insisted upon.
But is he right? But is he right? He does. But is he right in that strategy?
Well, you know, look, I mean, if you try to look at it dispassionately, Donald Trump's ballot in all the public polls since the campaign started never got above 44%. You can't win a presidential race without multiple candidates dividing up the vote in order to win at 44%. He's got a problem. He's got to be able to crack that 44%, and the people who he has to convince are not his loyal supporters. So he's going to give us a convention replete with, you know, all the base rhetoric that he has to keep that 44% happy. But I'm not sure what he has in store in order to get the other 6 to 8% that he needs to win this election.
All right, Rick Davis, stick with us. We've got some more questions, as we always do, for you, one of which is going to be about the folks who are running this campaign and running the White House. We did see Kellyanne Conway stepping away, and when you think about the timing of that, especially with another former campaign chairman, that, of course, being Steve Bannon, getting arrested last week, Paul Manafort, another former chairman, already in prison. I want to see what Rick Davis makes of all that, Carol.
Yeah, listen, I do wonder, you know, does it feel like things are chaotic, to say the least? So we're going to get to that certainly when we come back with him. All right, for those of you listening in New York and San Francisco, watching on YouTube, Bloomberg Business Week continues. If you're listening on Bloomberg 99.1 in D.C., Sound On with Kevin Cirilli is coming up next. Jason and I, though, we're coming back with Rick Davis, partner at Stone Court Capital.
Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Coming up, we're going to continue our conversation with Rick Davis, our go-to guy. He's seen some Republican conventions in his time, he's kind of the perfect guy. And he's run some campaigns, so the perfect guy to talk about what it means when people are like, yeah, I'm out.
Exactly. I really want to ask him about Kellyanne Conway because, man, that was a headline we were talking about a bunch here at home. All right, let's get a check on the world of business and some of the news after the close. Here is once again Doug Krisner. Hey, Doug.
Hey, Carol. So it was the night before the beginning of the convention that the Trump administration announced FDA authorization for the emergency use of convalescent plasma. Today, the equity market had the first opportunity to respond. Fair amount of optimism that the administration is going to fast-track not only vaccines but COVID-19 treatment. So we had the S&P 500, NASDAQ comp rising to records, the Dow shy of an all-time high, but it was up about 1.4% today. And the EPA gave American Airlines emergency approval to deploy a new weapon against the disease. This is a surface coating. It kills coronavirus for as many as 7 days. And that news sent shares in American Airlines up more than 10% in sympathy. Carnival Corp higher by nearly 10%. You guys were talking about Disney earlier. Stock was up about 2.5% today. Macquarie Research estimating that Disney will generate as much as $11.2 billion in direct-to-consumer revenue this year. That would be roughly 19% of total sales. That's a level rivals in traditional media have not matched. In the minus column today, Zoom down about 2.5% on word of partial outages. We had Apple shares rising to an all-time high. This was the last day to own Apple in order to qualify for that 4-for-1 stock split. And as expected, TikTok today filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration. That was over the executive order banning transactions using the app here in the States. TikTok said it's not a security threat. I'm Doug Krisner. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash.
It is indeed. All right, Doug Krisner, thank you so much. This is Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Massar along with Jason Kelly. Rick Davis is with us, partner at Stone Court Capital, former Republican strategist and Bloomberg contributor, still with us on the phone from Virginia. So Kellyanne Conway. That headline hit and you thought, what, Rick? Or maybe you knew something before the headline hit.
Well, regardless of the headline, it's an interesting situation that exists in Trump world, right? The combination of his campaign and their leadership and the White House and the leadership there. Kellyanne was the only one in the White House with significant campaign experience. She was the sort of tie who, in meetings, could pull together things that they were doing in the administration and what their potential political impact was. Without her there, it leaves the White House kind of naked on, sort of sage political managers. And so it puts even more pressure on the campaign. Now, lately, the campaign manager, Bill Stepien's been going over and seeing Trump on a daily basis. So maybe it was the opportunity to sort of use that as the exit door and tend to her personal life. So not exactly sure what the motivation was, but it does leave a White House a bit in turmoil and without someone who actually knows the political game pretty well going into a presidential election.
So, Rick, as a campaign manager or as a senior campaign advisor at this point, what's the advice you give an incumbent president, and with all the caveats that Donald Trump is different, Donald Trump is going to do his Donald Trump thing, we're going to see loads of that this week, but, even if history doesn't repeat itself, it tends to rhyme. We have seen underdogs, and we know that Donald Trump in some ways likes that position in many ways. What's the advice you give him at this point, candidate Trump?
Well, running John McCain's campaigns, he only liked being an underdog.
Yeah.
So it was a constant effort to get down before you could get up. Look, I mean, there are very few options available to him. He's got to start, winning some battleground states, and as I said in the past, that he seems capped out at 44%. So when you can't go up in the polls, the only other option for you is to bring your opponent down. And I think we will see an unmerciless attack on Joe Biden and Kamala Harris this week at the RNC. I think there's a recognition that we may not be able to see Donald Trump gain votes, so we better start going after the Democratic ticket in earnest.
Was it you who said, maybe with David Weston last week, and forgive me if I've messed it up, but said that, you get through, we were all DNC and all Democrats last week, and then, you know what, 2 weeks from now, we won't even be thinking about it. And I do wonder what happens here with the Republicans similarly. In 2 weeks from now, will it really matter? Will we be thinking about it?
2 weeks from now, you probably won't be thinking about it. The reality is conventions are great while they're going on, but they don't necessarily show any lasting impact. So what Joe Biden was able to do was actually consolidate his Democratic Party at his convention. There were questions about whether or not people would actually vote for Joe Biden or just against Donald Trump. And a lot of the polls showed most of his support was anti-Trump, not pro-Biden. He actually moved about 12% over to pro-Biden with his convention. So there was some positives, but that's about it now. Donald Trump, he's got a different problem. He's got to either rip some of that off of Joe Biden, or he's got to find a way to improve his image. I think that is an exceptionally difficult task. And so I'd say 2 weeks from now, people are going to be scratching their head going, wow, this whole convention process came and went and amounted to basically status quo ante. The polls will be probably about the same 2 weeks from now than they were today.
Rick, you know so much of the nuance and the atmospherics of this, and I do wonder, much has been made, so much tut-tutting in the media and beyond about the fact that the White House will be a set, essentially, for this convention. How big a deal is that sort of optically and beyond, from your estimation?
Well, optically, it's the power of incumbency. We talk about that a lot in politics. What's it worth? Is being the incumbent worth 5 points? Would Trump be below 40% if he weren't the incumbent? Who knows? But to be able to say, hey, I'm going to give my acceptance speech. I can't do it at a hall, which would certainly be his first priority, right? 50,000
a packed hall, right?
People.
Just screaming people, yeah.
Yeah, but instead, he's going to be in the White House, which is not a bad backdrop. I mean, we saw the Biden convention. I mean, it was basically backdrop free. I mean, how many American flags were rented that week? I mean, it was amazing. And so Trump has better options, and he's going to take every use of them he can.
All right. Rick Davis, really good to catch up with you. Can't wait to talk more as this week unfolds, because I think regardless, it's going to be a doozy. Regardless of where you come from, it is going to be fascinating to watch. It's going to be a show.
I think about the use of the White House as a background. I think of the movie The American President, and I think about where Donald Trump can say, yep, we've got the virus. Here's what I'm doing. I am the president. I am in the hot seat. Joe Biden and his team haven't even gotten their close. You know what I mean? You can think about how the optics on that are pretty powerful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Our thanks to Rick Davis. We know we're going to be catching up with him later in the week. Right now, let's catch up with Ed Baxter. He's out in San Francisco with World National Headlines. Hey, Ed.
All right, and I'm trying to keep up with you guys. Let's stay on the same track. Donald Trump, Mike Pence have been officially nominated at the RNC. With the announcement made, there'll be no platform. Bloomberg political contributor Rick Davis, as we were talking here, tells Carol and Jason this will be the Donald Trump show because, well, the platform usually
stand as sort of the ideological governance of the party. And what's the party stand for? Under Trump, the party stands for Trump, and really whatever he wants it to be. And so this is very much in keeping with how Donald Trump likes to run things. It's all about him, and that's what this convention is going to be all about.
Now, Mr. Trump has already spoken today, saying the economy is good and the jobs picture is very good. California wildfires still nowhere under control, major ones at about 15% containment, and Governor Gavin Newsom says the state is waiting for more help from the outside.
We've burned 1.2 million acres since just a week or so ago. Again, 1.4 million acres to date, and that's about 200,000 acres that predated these 13,000+ lightning strikes that we have experienced.
Now, he reports 7 people have now lost their lives. Postmaster General Louis DeJoy in front of a House subcommittee with some members on attack, and a report showing that mail service slowed in July right after he took over.
I did not direct the removal of blue collection boxes or the removal of mail processing equipment. Second, I did not direct the cutback on hours at any of our post offices. And finally, I did not direct the elimination or any cutback in overtime.
Now he says he has taken steps to protect the integrity of mail-in voting. In San Francisco, smoky San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter. This is Bloomberg.
Thanks, Ed. Definitely thinking about a lot of our friends out there in Northern California. I was catching up with one of our producers earlier, and a couple of our producers actually, and just hearing the stories, and caught up with a friend actually over the weekend who was just talking about how, obviously people are very much confined to their homes owing to coronavirus and being safe, but, to go outside because of the air quality, having nothing to do with the virus, they're recommending N95 masks.
Oh, God. That is unbelievable. Wow.
And obviously the cost to property and
well, think about it though too, right? Like if you're stuck in the house, one of the few things you can do is go outside during the virus, right? That's a safer way.
Right.
But you cannot when you've got these fires that California is dealing with and the smoke.
Yeah,
like that
absolutely.
Yeah.
So definitely keeping an eye on that, and it's not getting any easier. And some of what we've heard from Governor Gavin Newsom is troubling in terms of the size and scope of those fires.
And it hasn't been declared a national emergency, has it yet?
It has not. They are asking about it. It's been a state of emergency from a state level, but I believe they're still waiting for the federal government to do
the amount of fires, I think, from what I understand, was like already the size of like Rhode Island, the amount of land that has already been lost. I mean, it's really just the extremes of what's happening.
Yeah, it absolutely is, and it is largely confined at the moment. This time around, it is largely confined to Northern California. So, again, for the moment, it's the season out there, unfortunately, for these types of things to happen. And caught a little bit of that recent movie, the documentary that Ron Howard did about Paradise and what's going on there. And you also worry, and I mentioned this story last week, that a friend of mine, Molly Peterson, produced for KQED about the risk of wildfires for COVID patients and nursing home and assisted living residents because of, just being already very vulnerable. So we'll keep an eye on all of that.
It's just one stress point after another. It's just unbelievable. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
We had record highs today for the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ Composite. Nonetheless, we still find ourselves in a situation where equity trading is very, very narrow in terms of breadth. Only around 59% of the members within the S&P 500 are trading above their 200-day moving averages, and that is an unusually low number when you consider that the benchmark is at a record high. Today, the S&P was up 1% to 3431. We also had a record for the NASDAQ Composite at 11,379. The gain there was about 0.6%. And the Dow was up nearly 1.4% to 28,308, but that was shy of a record. There was a fair amount of enthusiasm today on the Trump administration fast-tracking vaccines and treatments for COVID-19. Have to talk about Apple today because today was the deadline to own Apple shares in order to qualify for that 4-for-1 stock split. By the way, we also learned from our Mark Gurman that Apple is planning to reopen, at least to begin the reopening process for those U.S. retail stores that had been closed over the past several weeks due to a spike in local COVID-19 cases. Disney shares popped 2.5%. We had a report from Macquarie Research today estimating that Disney is going to generate as much as $11.2 billion in direct-to-consumer revenue this year. That would account for roughly 19% of total sales, and that's a level rivals in traditional media haven't matched. 10-year Treasury last quoted in New York at a yield of 65 basis points. I'm Doug Krisner. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Doug, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly and Carol Masser. And we turn now to, I got to tell you, a guy who has developed into one of the must-read reporters at Bloomberg. The work he's doing around Silicon Valley is just terrific. And the issue that his latest story takes on is something we've talked in this program about, Carol, and has been the subject of some great reporting by the team looking at Silicon Valley and specifically venture capital and specifically the structural racism that exists there. Talking about Nico Grant. He's an enterprise technology reporter looking after a lot of the key companies out there. He joins us on the phone